as a product, there are two parts to this whole business. Okay. First is we are actually when we say we are communicating with SQL Server, we're communicating against a piece of software. Okay. That piece of software is implemented as a Windows service, and it's a network-based service. Okay. So you'll find SQL Server for Windows NT. Okay. Now on a single machine, such as this one, there are indeed 3 copies of the same software that is currently running. Okay. There are 3 instances. Now the things that separates them is each of them offers a service to their own set of data. So strictly speaking, the database is the actual file that contains user data. Now these instances, these 3 things, they are actually more or less carbon copies of one another because they contain software and codes. Okay. So you're a programmer, you're writing a Microsoft SQL Server, and the instance is just the software and code that runs in memory. Okay. And in any server that has SQL Server running, you'll find them under program files, Microsoft SQL Server. Okay. And within the Microsoft SQL Server, you'll find SQL Server MS SQL Server. Okay, so in here, you'll find something called bin, stands for binary data. Okay. So when Microsoft sells you a SQL Server, what they're selling you is this piece of software that you install and then you run from it. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. DLL's SQL Server.exe, that's the proverbial billion-dollar binary. Okay, that's the software that's right at SQL Server. Okay. So that's the software, that's the instance while it's running. And when you stop or end task, the software is gone. Okay. And when the software is gone, it doesn't mean it does not mean that your data is gone. It's just the access to the data. It's like your data is in some kind of storage. Okay, and instead of being some kind of storage, let me just show you exactly where those files are. Okay. So when you go to Program Files again under Microsoft SQL Server, you'll find again that's the software, that's the instance. Okay, so we have 3 copies of Microsoft SQL Server. We have a default instance, the second one, the third instance. So we have 3 instances running. So that's the first instance of the 3. And when you're looking at the data section, now each of these files, an MDF file, an LDF file, okay, each of these files makes up what we call a database. Okay. Fantastic. All right. So folks, let's do something together. This is where you need to switch to your machine, and I'm going to try to do it slowly. Okay. On your lab machine, you're going to find a D drive. Okay. You're going to find a D drive. On your D drive, there is a lab file folder, and we will see this again in the lab file. Okay. Now, it depends on which lab we are on. So let's suppose we're going to be on lab 1 soon. On lab 01, you'll find a starter. Now, almost every module requires you to run the setup.cmp before you begin the lab. Now, don't just double click on it though. Under the starter folder, okay, make sure that you do right click and run as administrator, otherwise you will get an error. Otherwise you will get an error. So when you do that, what is happening behind the scene when you do run as administrator? It is performing a restore of the environment. So by doing so, we are resetting the environment back to what it's like. Okay. Back to what it's like. So this will give you a good starting point. Alright, so what this is doing behind the scenes is to, not surprisingly, restore from a backup file into these data files. So once these data files are in place, we can then say, hey server, can you give us some information from those databases? Okay, so we know our SQL Server runs as a background service. So what tool do we use to talk to it? When we have a 411 service, we pick up the phone and call them, right? But when we have a database, we pick up this tool called SQL Server 2014 Management Studio. We use this tool as our ways to talk to the SQL Server. Okay. Now, as you'll see that this screen comes up and say, who would you like to call? And the very first drop-down box says, SQL Server as a product offers 4 distinct sets of services. Relational database, multidimensional or BI semantic model kind of database. Be able to render reports and do data integration. So which one do you want to talk to? So right now we want to ring the database engine. Ring. Alright, so here's a server name. Who do we want to talk to? That simply means we want to talk to the default instance. Okay. And if we want the second instance, we can do SQL 2 or SQL 3 for any other instance that we want to do. Alright, so we're going to do MySQL, and by clicking on connect, alright, so the server answers. Fantastic. That's actually a good sign. The server says, I'm here, how can I help you? That's great. And here is the database. And you'll notice for the most part of our 5-day workshop, we will be using the T-SQL database, occasionally referred to AdventureWorks. Occasionally referred to AdventureWorks. Now we can then use this to explore what's inside of that database. To say, hey, can you tell me what's in T-SQL? We can see all the tables. Okay. And we can write queries against it. So we'll spend a good amount of time writing queries against these database objects. So folks, the key thing to remember is number one, in the beginning of every lab, we are going to have to run those setup.cmd to make sure that we don't run into surprises later, such as missing tables or missing data or the data doesn't match up and that kind of stuff. Okay, so ignore that. Much. Okay. Yes. Ah, fantastic. So if you are logging in, try to use the command to paste the password. So under command, right. The SQL server does not require a password because you will simply connect as your Windows account. So there is no password required. So just a simple connect will do. Okay, so you got that error message? Your name is me? Alright, so folks, hold on a second, I have the screen frozen momentarily, please. Okay, looking at it. Good. So notice, make sure you choose Windows authentication, and that will do the trick. No problem. Alright, so folks, a couple of things. When you make a connection to the server using the Connect tab, please be mindful we're connecting to the database engine using Windows authentication. Simply means we're asking the SQL server, hey, SQL server, don't do your own authentication. Let the machine, let the server do its own authentication. Okay, so that will do the trick. Okay, fantastic. Alright, so that looked very well. Awesome. Alright, so this is what SQL Server at a very high level. It's a service, it's a software service that we communicate to using SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, we have the opportunity to write queries to the server, and the server answers to our questions. So that's the basic mode of operation. Okay. Typically contains objects and data. So we're going to be using T-SQL database in this course. Okay. It's a very simple database with a few schemas that has some tables that we can query and do things. All right. So to learn about the database, if you're brand new to a database, what's always helpful is a database diagram. So the first thing you want to do is drill down to the databases, find your T-SQL section, expand T-SQL, and click on database diagram. Now this tool is going to ask you to install something like that. Just say yes. Okay. Now here is a new database diagram. So right click again. Now if you know how to right click, you know how to use most of Microsoft product. Here's the truth. So we're going to right click on the database diagram and say we're going to add a table. Alright. So add everything except tests. So we're going to add everything except tests. So click on add. Alright, as you do that, you're going to have a whole bunch of tables laid out, something like that. Okay. So notice I'm using this area to try to navigate this diagram. Okay. So you can see At the center is a orders table, which there are various connections, lookups. Remember earlier we talked about, well, we have a customer ID, but who knows what customer ID 7 is? Well, who knows? This guy knows. So here's a table that we can look up customer ID. There is even a link that shows you, key, infinite. So what does that mean? That means this is a one side, and that is the many side. Okay, so the one side and the many side. Okay, so folks, if you do not see T-SQL in your list of databases, that simply means on your D drive, on your lab files, on lab 01 starter, there's a setup.cmd. Make sure you right click and run as administrator, because if you just run it, you'll get a security error. You have to run as administrator. Sure. On the bottom there is a folder file called File Explorer. So when you are in the File Explorer, you ought to be able to find on the left hand side under this PC there is a D drive. Or you can double click on that thing right there. Okay. And then you can search, follow through the path with lab files and lab 01. Yes, actually, down here, all you need to do is single click, actually. Don't need to double click that. Okay. Right there. Okay. If you let me know your name, I can quickly take a look at. Sorry? Okay, hold on. Got it. Hold on. I am on my way over. Okay, got it. I'm looking at your screen right now. Okay, so you'll notice there's a File Explorer, right? So just left click on that icon one time. Yep. And click on that. Huh. Okay, so click on that. Yep. Alright, so click on D. There you go. And click on Lab Files. Okay. Cool. Oh, it looks like it's trying to rename it. Okay, so I'm highlighting it and try to hit Enter key. See if the Enter will take you into the folders. Okay, good. Alright, so Lab 01. Cool. And within the starter folder. Okay, so right click on setup.cmd and do a run as administrator. And this will prepare your server with the practice database. So give that maybe a minute, probably less than a minute. It's going to stop the server, restore the database, and restart the server. So now if you go back to your SQL Server Management Studio and refresh the database. Refresh the database means highlight the database and refresh it. Okay, it's right, yeah, correct. It's to the right of the Explorer. Alright, so folks, continue on. We have these database diagrams. So what does this diagram actually tell us? Well, this diagram tells us a whole lot of things. First off, it tells us the relationship between these tables. The key is the one side of a one-to-many relationship. And the sideway, this infinite sign here, means there can be many, many rows on the left-hand side that looks up to the customer sales. Okay, so in other words, you can paraphrase it as a customer can place many orders, and each order, well, may belong to a customer. May, because we don't have enough information to tell us whether each order must have an employee ID or maybe it's optional. Sorry, a customer. That's the employee, no customer ID. Well, we can right-click on each table, and you'll notice the table view section says we are only viewing the column names. That's why it doesn't give us all that information. Instead, if we switch the table to view standard, now we have a lot more information, including what kind of data is customer ID. And we have come to the conclusion it will be an integer data type. And it indeed allows null. Allows null simply says you don't have to fill in the customer ID. It's okay for an order to not for customers. Okay. Perhaps it's sending it to a non-customer location or what have you. So it's okay to not have a customer location. Okay. Any questions so far? Alright, so there we have it. Okay, so this helps us understand the relationship between the table, and when we run queries, we will make use of it. For example, we know we have a table called orders. The table name is orders. What's in the parentheses is called the schema. In Microsoft SQL Server, schema equals folders. So just remember that schema equals folders. So we are putting the orders table under the sales folder or sales schema. So that makes, interestingly, the fully qualified table name as MIA-SQL, which is server name, .tsql, which is the database name, followed by the schema name, followed by the table name. So we call that a fully qualified table name. So think of that dot as a way to clarify the scope of things. Okay, so under the MIA-SQL instance, there is a database called T-SQL. Underneath that database T-SQL, there's a sales schema, and within under which there's an orders table. All right, so here we can see Object Explorer. Okay. Cool. And you can well, see the database diagram. This is what it's good for. Fantastic. And later on, we'll use these two again to run the queries. But for the time being, we have accomplished, number one, that T-SQL database is restored. And number two, we're able to look at the database diagram. It's a very useful tool. So folks, it helps you understand your database layout much better. So we have, namely, the same database diagram. Orders can look up customers. And orders is the parent of order details. So what does that mean? That means we might have an order 100. Think of that as a receipt. So your receipt is one order. Within your receipt, there are line items. Each line item is stored as an order detail. In this little simple drawing, all four line items belongs to the same order 100. So we have one record in orders table, and four records in order details. Now each line item on your receipt, each line item, if you have a receipt that you can look at, each line item corresponds to which product did we purchase, and how much, and how many. So the quantity and unit price is recorded, and we can calculate the entire order by summing things up. Now each order looks up a product. A product is sold through a supplier, and they are categorized into various categories. All right, so that's where we're at. Okay, client-server database. Client is your SQL Server Management Studio in this class. Okay. Other common clients include web servers, Windows Forms, mobile apps. Okay, they are all so-called client software because they ask the server for answer. So they are all qualified as client software. Okay, and they usually go through the network to connect to the database. All right, so when it comes to query, every time we ask a question, we're getting a set of results back. A set is technically a unique bunch of data. So every record should be unique from every other record. Okay. So queries can be, as a set-based language, we can write SQL query scripts, and they are executed in batches. So very quickly, again, this is my SSMS, right? To actually write a query, use the new query button. Now this is going to give you a sheet waiting for you to type something. Now every so often, okay, you might write a query that you know is good, but for some reason it's not finding the object. It could be because you are not asking for the right database. So right now, at this moment, we're asking T-SQL database. Okay, so take a look at this drop-down box. Make sure you're at T-SQL database. So let's say I want to do a select star from sales. Notice there's IntelliSense that does sales dot orders. Okay. So that is a query, right? So at the end of the query, we put a semicolon at the end. And when you execute it, you'll see your text editor split into two. On top is your query, at the bottom is your results. You may use Control R to hide the results set so you have more space for you to type your code. Now we call that a set results. Okay. So folks, please give this a try. It's very straightforward. Okay. Click on New Query and you get that thing up. Select star from sales.orders. This query does not get much simpler than that. Okay. It really doesn't. Alright, so let me know if you have any question running this very simple query. Okay, it doesn't get a whole lot simpler than that. Alright, so let's move on. Alright, so SQL Server has a variety of versions. We won't bore you with all these details. Okay, but there are different versions, including free ones. SQL Server Express is free. You can download it online and use it for free. Okay, so there's some limitations. Now, in Microsoft course, we're going to always mention the cloud. You can also have Microsoft host your server, do your upgrade, and all that good stuff for you, rather than you have to manage those servers yourself. So we call that cloud services. Fantastic. Alright, so getting started with SQL Server Management Studio, we have looked at how to start SSMS, we know how to execute queries, and we've done through these demos. Using books online, nowadays we pretty much rely on the internet in order to find helps that we want, and you will see me throughout the course using Google as an online helper. Unfortunately, actually, you know what? I take that back. I think these lab does have internet capability, so you could search for help online here. The website that you can find most of these help is in msdn.microsoft.com. Okay, now in this website, msdn.microsoft.com, is where you can get all the documentations, API and references. Okay, so there's no shortage of Microsoft product documentations here. Okay. And under the server and enterprise, you'll find Azure SQL Server and a long list of things. reference, developer reference for SQL Server. That's what I was looking for. So you can find the developer reference for SQL Server 2014. So, alright, so here you have it. You'll find these various references, anything you could possibly think of. So that's where the reference resides. Okay. Cool. Alright, so folks, this first lab is really a non-issue, just trying to help you learn about working with SQL Server Management Studio. So for the first lab, I'm going to do a bit of hand-holding with you. So exercise 1, working with SQL Server Management Studio. So we'll take this together. In fact, I am going to pull up the document and walk you through the first of the many exercises. So folks, I'm going to open up folks, I'm going to use the PDF version of the book. The only reason I do that is easier to find page numbers. But since you have the skill pipe, you know what? If you have the skill pipe, I'm going to use the skill pipe too. So folks, I'm going to So I'm going to read this online to show you when you're using the reader, there is a module 1. And also, as you're using the skill pipe, notice when you scroll past module 20 is a set of lab answer keys. The lab answer key will give you step-by-step procedure. So here, exercise 1, we're going to open SQL Server Management Studio. Check. In the Connect to Server window, click Cancel. Close the Object Explorer, close the Solution Explorer. Okay, so we're going to learn what happens when we lose all those windows. So let's give that a try. So if your Management Studio is open right now, please close it. So click on Management Studio. We're going to click on Cancel, and we will we'll close Object Explorer, so everything's gone. So how do we bring them back? We can open the Object Explorer by selecting Object Explorer on the View menu or press F8 on the keyboard. So I'm going to use the View menu. View. The first item under View is your Object Explorer. Now to bring the Solution Explorer back, again you can use View, Solution Explorer. Alright, so folks, from time to time, if you really manage to lose your layout, there's always a window, reset Windows layout. Okay, so there's your Hail Mary pass. So when you do that, you reset everything back. So that's a pretty simple task 1, right? So task 2, we're going to configure the editor setting to make the font generally bigger. Okay. So to customize this environment, we're going to use Tools, Options. In the environment, we're going to change the font to 14. That's what we're going to do. So under Tools, Options, under Environments, we can specify the font and colors. Now we can control the font that we'll be using throughout our lab to make it bigger. So we're going to say size 14. Now there's a bunch of other options that you can set, including line numbers and word wrap. Okay. So folks, I'm going to turn on word wrap and line numbers because it's easier for me to present with those options turned on. So I'm going to head over to Text Editor. Within all languages under the Text Editor, okay, I want to make sure I enable word wrap as well as line numbers. So that's easier for me to see the whole screen without making you dizzy, and also display a line number so we can all talk about line numbers. So let's move on to the next requirement. So we have set our text size. Now, the next step is to go to the text editor and clear the IntelliSense. Clear the IntelliSense will make it so we don't get all these wiggly lines all over the place. At the same time, you lose a little help on completing the syntax. So it's up to you if you want to delete it or you want to disable it or not, but you want to know where it is. Okay. So let's go to text editor, transact SQL, expand it, and under IntelliSense you can choose to enable IntelliSense or disable it. Okay. I prefer to keep it enabled, so I'm going to go against the direction by keeping my IntelliSense enabled. Now here's a disclaimer though. There are going to be times what happens, Visual Studio builds a cache of what kind of object is in your database. So if you create new object or you modify existing object, the IntelliSense will think you're referring to a non-existing item, but it's okay. If you know you type it right, ignore those red underlines. Okay, so if you know you have it right, don't worry about IntelliSense. Okay, only use it when it's useful, ignore them when you know you're right. So that's the bottom line. It can be a little bit disturbing to see it constantly if you're just new to SQL, but in the meanwhile, I suggest you keep it on. I'm okay with it. Okay, so you can change the tab size. I don't really care for the tab size, so I'm going to leave it alone. Okay, on the query results. Okay. So this controls what do we see when we issue a query. Does the result comes back in a column and row, pretty much like an Excel, or it's something that's just a text. So I'm going to go to query results in my options under SQL Server. And when we results to the grid, okay, we want the column headers when copying and saving the results. So when you run a query and you want to save the result, you can include the column headers. Okay, that's about it. So click on OK and we accept changes, and this is done. Okay. So folks, the first exercise is entirely about configuring your environment in tool options. Okay, there are a lot of options that I suggest you explore a bit to customize this environment, change colors, backgrounds, and all of this stuff. And also, in case you have messed up your windows, in case your Object Explorer disappeared, your Solution Explorer disappeared, things are all messed up, you can always use Reset Windows Layout, which resets everything to the factory settings. Okay. And then you can use View to bring up the Solution Explorer. Next, we're going to show you how to organize T-SQL script. Okay. Yes, please do. On a single machine, yes. So if this is your machine, all your settings will persist. Correct. Now, if you want the same setting available on two machines that you have, you can export the settings from one machine to the other. This is only if you're transferring the settings between machines. input export. Besides that, yeah, it saves within your profile, so you keep there. No, actually, you don't lose any of the settings. You only reset the layout. Yeah, you don't reset the setting. You only reset the layouts. So that's good there. So, very good. All right. Now, moving on to the next topic is create an organizing T-SQL script. Creating a project. Okay. Alright, so we're going to use project to organize all the related files. Okay. So we're going to use File menu, select New, and create a project in that location. So think project as a way that we can keep related files. And that's where we want to keep the project. Okay, so let's give it a try. We're going to do this in every lab. Okay. So notice how our solution explorer is blank. We're going to use File New, Project. Now it defaults to SQL Server script, so don't select the wrong template. Okay, the template we want is this guy. So make sure that's the one we use. Our project is going to be called My First Project. So that's the name of the project. And it will sit on D drive, lab files, lab 01, starter. Okay, so that's the path on the hard disk where all these SQL files will be located. Let's click on OK. Alright, so you'll notice within the solution, now here's my first project, and I have 3 folders underneath. Connections, queries, and miscellaneous. So within the project, we can maintain the connections to where the server is. Where are the objects? So we use the connections folder to keep all the connections. Queries is where we keep all the files that we want to reuse in the future. Okay, so first, let's start with a new query. So you can right-click and say, I would like to add a new query. By default, it gives a silly name called SQL Query 1. And we'll deal with it. We'll just keep a SQL Query 1. You can rename it if you like. And you'll notice as soon as you create a query, the project says, wait a minute, who is your server that your query should run against? For the time being, I'm just going to keep everything at default and do a connect. Now, folks, a couple of things I want to highlight is, take a look at this band at the bottom. It tells you which database, who are you, what version of SQL Server you're talking to. Okay. These are result statistics, so it tells you how many results and how long was the query. and how many records did it return. So right now it's all 0 because we haven't executed any query yet. And also on top, now sometimes you don't see the whole thing. You can put your mouse over it and it will show you the whole thing. It shows you who you are talking to, MIA SQL1, what database you're communicating with, and who are you, and what session ID do you carry. I am currently ID 51. Now I can say use tsql, and notice as soon as I run, you run, execute, your database will now change to tsql. Now it's very important to make sure you run that. Okay, so you are talking to the right database. And every time you save, so notice I'm going to hit an enter, and as soon as you hit enter, there's a star next to your file that tells you, hey, you have changes in your file that has not yet been saved. So don't forget to save them. Okay. All right, so this is one file. You can keep all your query in there, and also know what each of these parts do. Okay. All right. Okay, so we're going to do a little rename of these query files. So we're going to right click, rename to my first query. No problem. So rename is fairly simple. Right click, rename. You can go ahead and rename these files. Yes. Sure. Ooh. Sure. Okay, so in another word, the virtual machine is now responding to your keyboard input. Is that right? Okay, I've seen this happen before. Now, I would suggest you, if you can see my screen right now, the first thing you want to try is go to support. Now, what is the machine remote controller are you using? Actually, in your lab machine, right? On the right-hand side, there's a little flyout that looks like this, that has content, machine, and support. Under the support tab, okay, do you see an HTML5, Flash, Silverlight, etc.? Can you tell me which one are you using? Okay, try to not use Flash. Use that drop-down box and see if you can use HTML5 instead. And see if you have your key. Okay, what browser are you using at the moment? And it doesn't have HTML5. Okay. How about Silverlight? Can you try the Silverlight? See if that works. It's possible. So HTML5 usually works pretty good. So try to re-sign in, and don't forget to close the one you're on right now. Okay. So you can continue there. No Let me know how it works out. Cool. All right, so to continue. Okay, so that's my first query.sql. Okay, so next up, oops. Right. So we're going to add a secondary SQL file, and we're going to try to remove versus delete. Okay, so it's actually very straightforward. We're going to add a new query, so right-click on queries, add a new query, and rename this to my second query. And see for yourself that both of those files can be found in Lab 01 starter. So notice my folder is the same name as my solution. And when I go one level deeper, I will find the project subfolder. So this one is matching to my solution, and that matches to my project. Now going underneath, I will find the two query files. One file, two files. Okay, you can pretty much ignore those whole weird looking extension file. You can safely ignore that. Okay. Nothing useful there. At least nothing that we care. Alright, so knowing that, notice if you right click on the file and say remove one of the file, it will tell you, okay, in what way do you want to remove? Do you simply want to remove the file from the project and keep it on the disk? Or choose delete to permanently delete that file? So I'm going to choose remove first. So notice it's gone from my project. But on my hard disk, I can still see it. Now for my second query, I'm going to right click, remove it as well, but this time I'm going to choose delete. And you will soon realize that, hey, my second query is really gone. So the question is, well, now my first query is still on disk. You can actually drag and drop them back into your project, and it will add them back on. Okay, like you never removed it. All right, fabulous. Sure. Okay, your name is again? Okay, for this lab, we are creating a new project. So, okay, so, no problem. What is your name? Paul. Okay, got it. No problem. So I can quickly take a look at where we are at there. Okay. No problem. Yes, open project solution. Got it. Yes, you. Okay, so actually, you don't need to go that far. Just go one level back. Go up one level. There you go. And notice the SSMSSLN. That's a mouthful. Yeah. So if you select open on that solution, you'll be back to where you begin. Now, here's the thing, though. What you're missing, what's missing on your screen is called a Solution Explorer. Correct. So go to the View, okay, and select Solution Explorer. There you go. So you will be able to go back to where you are. Excellent. Cool. No problem. All right. Fabulous. Alright, so folks, just beware that this solution is a way we can organize SQL queries, and we can add existing queries to it, or remove existing, we can remove files from this project just as easy. Okay, so moving on. That's our second exercise. Piece of cake. Alright, so task number 3 is to close everything and reopen the project we have just created. So folks, because think of each project as a suitcase. So let's say we're done working on it. We will close the suitcase and we're done for the day. Let's go home. Save changes. Yes, finished. Alright, now, next day we're coming back and we want to continue working on this project. So what do? Well, the easiest way is if you know where the project is. We happen to know where our project is. It's on D drive. Okay, on lab 01, starter. Okay, remember that's our solution, my first project solution, and you'll find a file called ssms.sln. So if you double click on that, it's going to reopen your SQL Server Management Studio and bring you back to where you left it off last time. Okay, so folks, make sure not only you can work on the project, you know how to open it. Okay. Open this project, and because as we move along, the module we're working on, we'll be opening some project that serves as a starting point. Alright, so folks, exercise 3, using book online. I wouldn't worry too much about this part because we will be using a lot of it as we go along to the next module. So don't worry about the exercise 3 about using books online. Just use Google or OK Google. That usually works very well. Alright, so that concludes lab number 1. I'm going to spend a few minutes to see if anyone has any questions.